What if I told you there's a way to rig a nightcrawler that will outfish every other rigging method? This is the best way to rig a nightcrawler on a jig head based on years of testing live worm strategies. I also cover a few tips and tricks to help you catch as many fish as possible. Nightcrawlers are an ideal snack for many target game species like walleye, panfish, catfish, trout, and bass. Worms don't fight back, they're easy to slurp up, and in my experience, most fish will go out of their way to eat a worm. The best way to rig a nightcrawler on a jig is first, split the worm in half using your thumb. Next, thread the worm onto your jig head like this and exit the worm at a point where the worm is relatively straight. I prefer the head side of the worm because they seem to stay more lively. This presentation is extremely natural in the water. The worm stays relatively straight while the tail can flutter around. In my experience, game fish prefer this type of presentation to something like where people ball the worm up on the hook. Tips, tricks, and frequently asked questions. 1. Why only half the worm? We find it both gets more bites in general, but also you don't lose your worm tail as often. If you put the whole nightcrawler on, you'll have a super long tail that fish will bite off, leaving you with just a worm nub, and you should re-rig in that situation. 2. Jig recommendations. Our absolute favorite jigs are VMC Mooneye jigs. They are the perfect nightcrawler jigs. They have the best bait keeper for nightcrawlers, the hook size is perfect, and the thinner gauge hook both increases hookup ratios with fish, but it also lets you pull the hook out of snags by bending it out. I put a link in the description if you want to check them out. 3. Can you fish both halves of the worm? Yes, they both work, but I preferentially use the front half of the worm because it tends to rig a little easier and stay alive longer. After a long trip, my family usually ends up with a box full of worm tails because everyone's been using the front halves. 4. Healthy worms stay firmer and wiggle more, which results in easier rigging and more fish catches. If you can, keep your worms cool by keeping the box out of the sun or put them in a cooler with ice. 5. Should you re-rig if your tail is bit off? Yes, definitely. It seems like fish really key in on that natural wiggling tail action in the water. If you lose your tail, re-rig with a fresh worm. 6. How to fish a nightcrawler on a jig? I find the easiest way is mostly just drag your jig across the bottom with some gentle lifts periodically. No need to get crazy, 6-inch jigs off bottom are usually sufficient. We frequently fish side channels on the river where we let the boat float with the current while we just vertically jig along the bottom. No fancy techniques needed except maybe reeling in or letting out line to make sure you're still on bottom throughout the depth changes. In conclusion, using lively worms rigged like this will consistently catch you more fish than other methods. Make sure to try it out on your next trip.